Website is manintheshroud.org. That's manintheshroud.org. He lives in Cleveland, David Onysko.
Well, I'd like to thank the Shroud Committee here in St. Louis, and particularly Joe and Mark, for this opportunity to speak. It's a privilege, it's an honor, and I'm grateful. Before I present my paper, I have a couple of comments I'd like to make. Let me put my glasses on here. This conference in St. Louis has kind of allowed me to come full circle. I think this is my 8th conference, and the first one was in 1991 in St. Louis, at St. Louis University. And Joe Marino was instrumental in putting that one on. And little did I know that, 23 years later, I'd have an opportunity here again in St. Louis to present a paper. But 2 years after that conference in St. Louis, there was one in Rome. And can I just see a show of hands of those who were in that 1993 Rome conference? Probably about a half a dozen or so. And that's where I met Russ, and we had a couple bottles of wine on the street corner, but we won't get into that. But anyway, on the way home from that trip, I was in the plane, and I happened to sit next to Dan Scavone and his lovely wife, Carolyn. And I remember saying to him on the way home, I got an idea about the Shroud, and I'd like to present a paper. And, I was new in the Shroud world, and Dan encouraged me to write the paper. And he was very supportive of it, and I never forgot that. And over the years, I wanted to write it, and he's here with his lovely wife here this weekend, and I'm pleased, and I just want to thank you publicly, Dan, for giving me that support. I finally got it done 23 years later. But now, one other thing before I begin my paper. I'm a sports guy, okay, and I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, as Joe mentioned. And my birthday's tomorrow. And but not only mine, thank you, not only mine, Richard Arario, another Shroud guy who's extremely well respected in the Shroud world, it's his birthday tomorrow too. And just one thing, Richard, would you just stand for a second, because I want you to see Richard, because he has a Shroud museum in Wabash. Okay, he'll wave his hand. He has a Shroud museum in Wabash, and you need to go there. If you're going through Indiana, you got to stop at his museum. And if you're not going through Indiana, he has one of the most extensive, if not the most extensive, Shroud collections, artifacts in the world. And it's worth seeing. And I would suggest at the breaker sometime today, you go pick his brain. And his website as well. But the second reason I mentioned my birthday and Richard's, it's not to put us on the spot, but like I said, I'm a sports guy. And there's a guy in this room who he's from Pittsburgh, okay? I'm not going to name him, but he's got a long ponytail. He's got the largest website in the world. He lives in Colorado. And, you could see him later about that. But anyway, the Pittsburgh Steelers play the Cleveland Browns tomorrow in Cleveland Stadium. And so I just have to say that for my birthday present tomorrow, I'm just praying that the Lord allows the Browns to whoop the holy snot out of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Of course, in Jesus' name. So anyway, that's it. I'm done. Okay. So. It's impossible to discuss the Shroud of Turin without referring to the Bible. Indeed, the very nature of the Shroud's controversy stems from the fact that it contains the image of a naked, bearded, long-haired man whose body suffered the brutal infliction of flogging and crucifixion. The stigmata of the man mirrors the gospel's passion narrative, and the image is likely that of Jesus Christ. Before I proceed any further, however, I must inform you that I am a Bible literalist. I believe in the literal interpretation of Scripture. I realize that this upfront declaration may make some of you uncomfortable. However, before I'm dismissed as a religious zealot, I would ask that you suspend any prior thoughts about this book, the Bible, and carefully consider what this paper will offer. That being said, Jesus Christ is as controversial today as he was 2,000 years ago, and evokes a strong emotional response from those who would dare to consider or to dismiss his claims. There are many in academia who would argue that people of faith, or those in syndonology, who seek to examine the veracity of the Shroud of Turin, somehow cast aside their intellect and are not true to the laws of scientific reasoning. Those who hold such a position would do well to consider the courageous declaration of the French scientist and zoologist Yves Delage. In 1902, convinced by the scientific evidence generated by the 1898 photographs of Secondo Pia that the shroud was authentic, Yves Delage wrote to the editor of the Revue Scientifique, quote, "If it were anyone else but Christ, there would be no contention. A religious question has been needlessly injected onto a problem which in itself is purely scientific, with the result that feelings have run high and reason has been led astray. If, instead of Christ, there were a question of some person like a Sargon, an Achilles, or one of the pharaohs, no one would have thought of making an objection. I recognize Christ as a historical personage, and I see no reason why anyone should be scandalized that there still exist material traces of his earthly life," end quote. I would disagree with Yves Delage on one issue. The religious question of the Shroud of Turin hasn't been needlessly injected. It is part and parcel to the controversy of the image question. Specifically, whose image is it, and how did it get there? If it is Jesus Christ, and if the image was formed by a supernatural resurrection event, it most certainly is religious. There are still others who take the position that matters in faith and science are mutually exclusive to each other. I would remind them that many of the greatest scientists of the past were also Bible-believing Christians who believed in the inspiration and authority of the Bible, as well as in the deity and saving work of Jesus Christ. Their commitment to believing in the Bible did not compromise their scientific discoveries. To the contrary, in many instances, it led to them. In fact, one of them, Sir Francis Bacon, is credited with formulating and establishing the scientific method. He is indeed the father of empiricism. Consider other founding fathers in their scientific discoveries who believed in the veracity of the Bible. Sir Isaac Newton, the law of gravity, calculus, the reflecting telescope. Nicholas Copernicus, geocentrism. Galileo Galilei, the refracting telescope. Johann Kepler, celestial mechanics, physical astronomy. Robert Boyle, chemistry. Lord Kelvin, thermodynamics. Leonardo da Vinci, hydraulics. By the way, it bears mentioning that Leonardo da Vinci was born in 1492, a full 100+ years after the first recorded showing of the Shroud in France. Despite what some would have us believe, the Shroud of Turin is not Leonardo's self-portrait. I could go on and on with this list, but I believe you get the picture. Okay. Contrary to the views of many, like those of Doctors Hall and Tite from the Oxford lab who carbon dated the Shroud in 1988, those who believe that the Shroud of Turin is the authentic burial cloth of Jesus Christ are not flat earthers. Indeed, even Professor Christopher Ramsey, the director of the Oxford Radiocarbon Laboratory, as well as a signatory to the 1989 Nature paper documenting the results of the C14 test, has admitted, quote, "There is a lot of other evidence that suggests to many that the Shroud is older than the radiocarbon dates allow, and so further research is certainly needed. Only by doing this will people be able to arrive at a coherent history of the Shroud, which takes into account and explains all of the available scientific and historical information, end quote. Interestingly, even Philip Ball, the former editor of Nature, who claimed that the 1988 carbon dating provided conclusive evidence that the linen of the Shroud of Turin is medieval, acknowledged, quote, "It's fair to say that despite the seemingly definitive tests in 1988, the status of the Shroud of Turin is murkier than ever. Not least, the nature of the image and how it was fixed on the cloth remains deeply puzzling," end quote. As I now delve into my hypothesis for this paper, that is, that a Shekinah glory of the Lord manifestation event was the mechanism for the image formation process and of the hosting vestige of the man seen on the Shroud of Turin, the rule to be observed then is this: take the Bible literally where at all possible. If symbolic or figurative language is observed, then look for the literal truth it tends to convey. The very reason we can equate the Shroud of Turin with Jesus Christ is precisely because of what is made known to us about him from the sacred text of his word, the Bible. The passionate suffering, death, Jewish burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ are recorded in the scriptures. It appears they are also recorded on a very old piece of funeral linen. That being said, any subsequent discussions about the Shroud of Turin and the search for an explanation to the image-forming process must include the Bible. To not do so would be scientifically limiting and might reflect an academic censoring of non-natural or of supernatural image formation theories. This would not be in the interest of true, unvarnished scientific inquiry, which, as demonstrated by Yves Delage, does not shrink from the pursuit of any road toward knowledge, no matter where that road may lead. We need only to look then at the archaeological dig sites of biblical ruins uncovered in the Holy Lands of the Middle East, pinpointed with astonishingly accurate detail. The four known locations of these ruins provide solid evidence that the Bible is not only a trustworthy guide to the past, but it can also inspire us with confidence that by employing its usage within the process of scientific discovery, it has often proven to be a valuable and a reliable tool. Thus, in this paper, we will enlist the aid of the Bible once again. My hope is that by in doing so, it may provide us with insight into our quest toward understanding the enigmatic nature of this cloth. The content within the pages of Scripture might offer clues to the question whose answer remains most elusive. Specifically, that question remains: how did the image on the Shroud of Turin come to be? Throughout the ages, and most certainly throughout the Bible, the idea of God appearing before, dwelling with, or manifesting his literal divine presence among his people is well documented. The emphasis here needs to be centered on the literal abiding presence of God. Though metaphoric, symbolic, and figurative references to a God manifestation can also be cited, at certain times and in certain locations throughout history, God has literally tabernacled or dwelt with his people. Whether appearing before them during the 40-year desert wandering as a pillar cloud by day to shelter them from the sun, in the form of a pillar of fire at night to guide them in the darkness, Exodus 13, or before the priests who could not stand to minister for the glory of the Lord had filled the temple, 1 Kings 8, 10 and 11, or to the shepherds abiding in the fields, keeping watch over their flocks by night, who were sore afraid as the glory of the Lord shone round about them, Luke 2, 8 and 9. The visible appearance of the presence of God, or the Shekinah glory, is without a question. Though the word Shekinah itself is not specifically found in the Bible, its idea most clearly is. In the Targum, the Aramaic translation of the Hebrew Bible, Shekinah glory is described as the majestic presence of God. Derived from the Hebrew roots Shekan and Shekinot, which advanced the concept of God abiding with his people, Shekinah, Shekinot, or Shekinah, were often used by rabbinic scholars to describe a literal, localized appearance of God cohabiting with his people. Though this cohabitation took on different forms, it was usually demonstrated within the medium of light. In the Old Testament, the divine majestic appearance was often seen as a bright cloud or as burning fire. This was attested to by the veiling of the face of Moses by the Israelites, whose countenance shined after being in God's fiery presence atop Mount Sinai. In the New Testament, the Shekinah glory aspect was seen radiantly, incandescently, and shone with great brilliance and luminosity. Often, the visible, physical appearance of God involved dazzling light. Indeed, such dazzling light has long been used by scholars to describe God. It is known as the primeval light, and it is a distinctly Jewish idea. It can also be used to characterize God in an allegorical way. Most often, however, it is used in rabbinic sources to describe God as being the literal, physical embodiment of light. In the Hebrew Old Testament, Shekinah glory, also known as the glory of Jehovah, is called Kavod Adonai and describes what God is doing. That is, he is dwelling with his people. In the New Testament Greek, Shekinah glory, also known as the glory of the Lord, is called doxa kurion and describes how God is doing it. That is, he is dwelling with them in the form of light. In Strong's exhaustive concordance, the Greek defines doxa as the awesome light that radiates from God's presence. We may conclude then that the Shekinah glory of the Lord, as described in both testaments of the Bible, declares that God's presence dwells with his people within the form of bright light. One might offer then that God's presence with men was enshrouded by light, in light, and as light. In mathematics, the transitive law of equality, also known as the transitive property law, states the following. If A equals B, and if B equals C, then A must equal C. This law is logical and well-reasoned. By applying the transitive law of equality to the scriptures, we can also make some definitive statements using variables A, B, and C. By substituting variable A with Jesus Christ, variable B with God, and variable C with light, we can use the scriptures to present the following equation. Point number 1, Jesus Christ is God. Variable A is equal to variable B. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word is God. John 1:1. Who being in the form of God thought it not robbery to be equal with God. Philippians 2, verse 6. I and my Father are one. John 10:10. Point number 2, God is light. Variable B is equal to variable C. This is the message which we have heard of him and declare unto you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. 1 John 1:5. Point number 3, Jesus Christ is light. Variable A is equal to variable C. And as he journeyed, he came near to Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven, above the brightness of the sun. And he said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. Acts 9, 3-5. The light that Paul speaks of here is not meant to be allegorical, though Jesus is certainly the spiritual light as well. The light Paul speaks of here is meant to be taken literally. Jesus Christ is dwelling both in the light and as the light. As he appears to Paul on the Damascus road, he is in effect the what and the how manifestation of the Shekinah glory of the Lord. He is dwelling in Paul's presence, and he is dwelling as light. Again, in Strong's Concordance, the Greek word for the above-mentioned light is defined 7 ways. Pheno, to shine, shining, to give light. Phos, daylight, firelight. Phoster, brilliance, splendor. Phosphoros, light-bearing. Photinos, full of light, bright. Photizo, to give light, shine, to be illuminated. And photismos, light, illumination. Note the last three words mentioned. Photinos, photizo, photismos. One can easily extrapolate a derivation and find the word photo. It bears mentioning then that the image on the Shroud of Turin is photo-like in nature. It is also encoded with 3D cloth-to-body distance and holographic information. Might the original Greek language for light used in the New Testament be a connection here? Do the descriptive words for light found in Strong's exhaustive concordance point in the direction of the Shroud of Turin? Are the gospel writers offering syndenologists of the 21st century a clue that the literal physical aspect of Jesus Christ embodies light? The summation then for point number 3 would be that Jesus Christ, according to the scripture, is garbed in light. He is cloaked in it. He wears it as clothing. He is phosphoros. He is the light bearer. As the physical embodiment of Shekinah glory itself, light literally exudes from him. As we shall soon see, his raiment, his clothing, his burial shroud is awash in it as well. In Matthew 17:2 we read, and he was transfigured before them, and his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. Mark 9:2 and 3 records the same transfiguration event as follows. And he was transfigured before them, and his raiment became shining, exceedingly white as snow, as no fuller on earth can whiten them. Luke 9:29 mentions the transfiguration this way. And as he prayed, the fashion of his countenance changed and was altered, and his raiment was white and glistering. All three of the above-cited scriptures states that he was transfigured, that his bodily appearance and physical countenance was changed and altered. The Greek translation for this is metamorpho, which literally means to change in form. An example of metamorpho would be when a caterpillar physically changes into a butterfly. In other words, the physical body of Jesus Christ was radiantly transformed and changed into light before them. His face shone like the sun. This is not meant to be a symbolic description, but a literal one. The Greek word for shine is lampo. The English word lamp is derived from this. What do lamps do? They illuminate and provide light. These scriptures mean that the face of Jesus Christ turned into brilliant shining and gave forth light. Matthew states that his clothing became white as light. Mark tells us that his clothing became shining, whiter than the whitest snow. Luke tells us that his raiment was white and glistering. In New Testament Greek, the translation for shining and glistering is to dazzle, to be brilliant, to flash like lightning. The whiteness of his clothing wasn't just white, it was exceedingly white. Again, the Greek translates this as very much, greatly, or completely white. Interestingly, it was so white that Mark goes on further to say that no fuller, translated bleacher, or one who cleans, in effect, dry cleaner, could not out-whiten it. Remember that word fuller. We will refer to it later. By using the aforementioned Greek translations, the transfiguration of Jesus Christ can be redescribed as follows. And the physical form of his body was changed into brilliant radiance before them. The appearance of his face turned to bright shining and gave forth light brighter than the sun. His clothing became brilliantly white, dazzlingly white, flashing like lightning around them. At the beginning of this paper, I quoted Yves Delage, who stated in part, a religious question has been needlessly injected onto a problem which in itself is purely scientific. I counter that the religious question of the Shroud of Turin hasn't been needlessly injected, that it is part and parcel to the controversy of the image formation question. Again, whose image is it, and how did it get there? I believe many would agree that it is indeed the image of Jesus Christ. Regarding the image formation question, what then can we observe? What remains has been referred to as, quote, the shadow of a man, or that of, quote, a vague human silhouette. It's been postulated by some that the image forming process resulted in the, quote, dematerialization of the body, and that the image left behind was the product of, quote, a tremendous flash of light. Still others suggest that the image-forming mechanism must have been equivalent to, quote, a gigantic photographic flash. As the image-forming process manifested itself, the surrounding area immediately became, quote, filled with a blinding light, and that this event must have been done, quote, in one instant. The words neutrons, beta rays, and gamma rays have become synonymous with this never-before-seen event. The shadow of a man, a vague human silhouette, the dematerialization of the body, a tremendous flash of light, a gigantic photographic flash done in an instant. The surrounding area immediately became filled with a blinding light. To those of us in syndenology, these descriptive words are certainly familiar to us. They have often been used to describe the image upon the cloth we gather here to study. However, you may be surprised to learn that the aforementioned descriptions are not cited to identify with the Shroud of Turin, nor are they used to explain how the image came to be imprinted on the uppermost surface of its fabric. Though they are eerily similar and bear an uncanny resemblance to adjectives used to describe the image formation process of the Shroud of Turin and its remaining vestiges, in fact, they are descriptions used by John Hersey in his book titled Hiroshima, which chronicles the tragic events that took place in August of 1945. I am referring, of course, to the atomic bombing of the Japanese cities of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which effectively ended the conflict with Japan in World War II. It is intriguing to note that the descriptive words used to visually capture the atomic bomb detonations and their horrifying after effects are not only comparable to adjectives used to describe the image formation process of the haunting image seen on the Shroud of Turin, but are in many instances identical. Both processes appear to have required a tremendous, perhaps unknowable amount of energy and light. Interestingly, and perhaps related to further Shroud study, is the fact that white clothing repelled the heat from the atomic bomb, while dark clothing absorbed it. Simply stated, those individuals wearing white did not suffer burns to the skin beneath their clothing. Conversely, those individuals wearing dark clothing did suffer burn to the underlying skin beneath. As it relates to the once pure white linen shroud, keep in mind that only the topmost surface fibers of the cloth are straw-colored. These yellow surface fibers covered the fibers immediately beneath and protected them from being chemically changed. As a result, the underlying fibers remained pure white, having been unaffected by the catalyst of the shroud's image-forming mechanism. Recall earlier the transfiguration event as described in Mark 9. He stated that the raiment or clothing of Jesus became shining, exceedingly white as snow, as no fuller on earth can whiten them. Oddly, the word fuller has been inserted into this particular text only, thus quantifying just how white the clothing of Jesus had become. Might this inexplicable insertion of fuller by Mark, as he describes the brilliantly white clothing of Jesus, which could not be out-whitened by one whose job it was to clean or bleach, offer a clue? Should we focus on the color white? It is a curious thing that the skin of bombing victims was protected that fateful August day in Japan. Despite the devastating flash of an atomic bomb, the whiteness of the clothing they wore shielded their skin from becoming altered or burned. Just as the whiteness of the clothing worn by Japan's bombing victims offered skin protection beneath that cloth surface, might the originally pure whiteness of the cloth that is the Shroud of Turin have offered similar protection to the underlying fibers beneath, not altering or discoloring them yellow, despite what some would insist was a comparable flash of energy and power. Might a Shekinah glory of the Lord manifestation event be the reason these fibers remained white? That similar to the transfiguration, the resurrection of Jesus Christ required his burial shroud to become dazzlingly white, and in that process, the underlying fibers were kept from being chemically changed. In addition to the dropping of the atomic bomb, the dropping of the atomic bomb instantly exposed unused hospital X-ray plates, some of which were stored beneath the surface of the ground. Recall earlier the words used to describe light: photinos, photizo, photismos. Is there a similarity to the flash of light projected by the atomic bomb causing the exposure of unused hospital X-ray plates with the Shroud of Turin? Is it just a coincidence that Shroud research tells us that the image on the cloth is photo-like, a word that can be extrapolated as a derivation of Greek New Testament descriptions for light, is three-dimensional, holographic, and appears to show bone and dental structures in X-ray-like fashion? Additionally, famously seen in World War II photographs of those Japanese cities are ghost-like images burned onto the walls and buildings of support structures. Silhouettes of objects, animals, and humans were cast as shadows by the light of the bomb as the dematerialization power of its explosive energy was released. The Shroud of Turin is a shadow-like, silhouette-like image. Many scientists believe that the energy force is equal to or perhaps greater than the atomic bombs dropped on Japan in World War II, and in the process of that event, dematerialized the man's body resting within the cloth of his burial. Conclusion. The image on the Shroud of Turin has confounded the world for centuries. Despite the scientific community's best efforts, it defies a complete understanding and has resisted persistent attempts toward an explanation of the image formation process. It has been described as archaeopoietas, not made with human hands. It has been thought by some to have been formed by a process of flash photolysis. Still others believe that the superficial image seen on the shroud's uppermost fibrils is the result of a yet-to-be-understood form of radiant energy. Similar to the Shekinah glory of the Lord, what remains on the burial cloth is the permanent presence of a man. He appears to have been dwelling for a long period of time, 2,000 years, within his funeral linen. Yet two questions still doggedly remain. Whose image is it, and how did it get there? If we decide to exercise intellectual honesty, we must then agree with Yves Delage, who courageously declared to skeptical colleagues who did not share his unbiased pursuit of scientific truth that the image on the Shroud of Turin is indeed that of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. The skeptical colleagues of our day, like Yves Delage, must not be scandalized that there still exist material traces of his earthly life. The principles advanced by William of Ockham, a.k.a. Occam's razor, most certainly apply to the first question. As to identity, the simplest answer is all roads point to Jesus. Having objectively answered the first question, we are then left with the second one. How did the image get there? Once again, by applying the mathematical transitive law of equality to the scriptures, we can state that because Jesus Christ is God, and because God is light, that Jesus Christ is light as well. Could it be that the Shroud of Turin's image is the light residue, dare I say, scorch-like, which remains permanently imprinted upon its linen fabric due to yet another Shekinah glory of the Lord manifestation event that was the resurrection. That at the very moment God the Father went about raising his Son, the once upon a time pure white burial cloth of Jesus Christ, as did his glistering raiment seen by the disciples on the Mount of Transfiguration, yet again became dazzlingly brilliant, exceedingly white as snow. That when his body underwent phosphoros metamorpho, the light bearer, Jesus Christ, changed in physical form in an instant as a tremendous explosion of light, in the twinkling of an eye, becoming brighter than the sun. That as the physical embodiment of the Shekinah glory of the Lord, Jesus Christ came bursting forth through his burial shroud, which could not hold him, leaving behind, as seen at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, shadow-like images which are everlasting traces of the primeval light that is God. This pictograph of linen, this quasi-photograph of the Redeemer's sin-bearing, efficacious pain, suffering, and love, impresses upon its fabric the visual testimony of Jesus Christ, who declared that though I must go to my Father, yet I will never leave you nor forsake you. Even today, the comforting promise of his remains evident for all to see, not just with our physical eyes, but more importantly with our spiritual eyes as well, the ones which take up residence and illuminate within the deep dark recesses of our soul. His spoken word having been brutally, graphically, and permanently recorded upon his burial shroud within the darkness of his garden tomb. I have a sense that endless searches for a natural explanation for the image-forming mechanism, though perhaps necessary, will continue to be thwarted by God himself. For without faith, it's impossible to please him. Hebrews 11:6. Rather, we should look for the courageous emergence of still another modern-day Sir Francis Bacon, the father of empiricism, who, along with others of his day, sought explanations to seemingly unanswerable scientific questions by believing in the inspiration and authority of the Bible, as well as in the deity and saving work of Jesus Christ. We should not allow the naysayers to frame the debate who unapologetically declare that matters of science and faith are mutually exclusive to each other. This is non-intellectual nonsense and needs to be unapologetically excised from the debate by those who rightly see, as did the founding fathers of science, the inclusivity and compatibility of faith with reason. May the words of Jesus spoken to Philip in John 14:9 never find occasion to be spoken to those of us who study his burial shroud. Have I been so long with you, and yet thou hast not known me? If the totality of the shroud's image-forming process is ever sufficiently discovered, I have the feeling it will only be given to those who take him, who is the Word, at his word. In the scripture, Jesus Christ self-declares, I am the light of the world. John 8:12. He is doxa kurion, the awesome light that radiates from God's presence. We would be wise to consider the words of the Apostle John, who, though in his 90s, suffering from failing health, and having been banished to the Greek island of Patmos by the Romans in the 1st century, was given a vision of heaven, the eternal city, and of the Shekinah glory of the Lord in Jesus Christ. He writes in Revelation 21:23, and the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God, the Shekinah glory of the Lord, did lighten it, and the Lamb, Jesus Christ, is the light thereof. Like the Apostle John, we too are given a vision. Only this vision, which covers our sin, is bloodied and dirt-stained. Its visage speaks of the one whom Isaiah 52:14 declares was marred more than any man. May our viewing of this image not be shrouded. May we each be given clarity of vision through the spiritual eyes within our hearts, in order that we may plainly see the one who enlightens before us. In my humble opinion, the Shroud of Turin bears upon its once dazzlingly pure white linen fibers the Shekinah glory of the Lord's presence, still permanently dwelling among his people within the glorious, radiant reflection of the light bearer himself, who is Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Thank you for your kind attention.